All right. Welcome, everyone. This is fantastic. All right, so we're going to get started in just a minute here. If you can take an opportunity to introduce yourself in the chat, let us know who's here, who you are, and let us know that you can hear us all right. Um, we are going to get started here in just a second. All right. Let's take a look here. Can folks hear us okay? Oh, thanks, Molly. Appreciate it. Hey, hi, John. All right. Well, if you have never been before, this is Mini AMA. It's an Ask Me Anything session that we do. We had typically done it monthly, but now we do it every other week. And it's an interactive educational series where we're joined by subject matter experts to answer your questions. My name is Maria Plussel. I am the executive director of MiniStar, and we are a nonprofit community organization that's built to nurture and engage those interested in technology through meaningful connection. So what that means is we are the organizers of some of the largest gatherings that bring together Minnesota's technology community throughout the year. So we put on Mini Bar, which is the nation's largest and longest running unconference. We put on Mini Demo, which is Minnesota's premier geek show and tell, where a bunch of people come together and get to know what the latest and greatest of what people are building in the tech community here. And we put together Mini Demo Back to Campus, which is same format, but all of the presenters are students or recent graduates. And we do this, Mini AMA. So this is really designed to bring these opportunities to anyone, anywhere over your lunch hour. And we're really excited to be joined today by Eryn O'Neil and by Justin Porter. So this session is a little bit different. It actually came out of, we hosted Mini Bar a couple weeks ago, and Eryn had a session on this topic, and 20 minutes was far too short to be diving into this meaty discussion. Lots of demand for a separate session for this, so we're really happy to have you back to be able to talk about this. And it's going to be moderated by our incredible MiniStar board member of almost 7 years now, Justin Porter. Justin will introduce himself, but he is the VP of Operations at Kipsu. So I'm going to have Justin kick us off. Thank you so much.
Right. Yeah, thanks, Maria. And hopefully everyone can hear my voice. I've been told I have a radio voice, and my response to that is I have a radio face to go with it. So, it's good to see a bunch of people on the line. I recognize some names here: Corey and Matt and Jeremy and a whole host of you. And hopefully the goal of this is to make this as interactive as possible. So again, please, as you have questions, I'd encourage you to use the chat. I have a few questions, but most importantly is getting your questions answered. As Maria mentioned, I'm Justin Porter. I've been with MiniStar for almost 7 years as a board member, and several years before that as a volunteer, and really passionate about the tech community here. We've got something pretty awesome in the Twin Cities, and excited to see what new events and opportunities that have come out of the pandemic. And doing these virtual events is one of them, and hopefully we can continue to grow and build these up. So I appreciate all of you who have signed on today, especially on a beautiful day, a little cool, but still sunny. I'm down in my basement, looking outside the egress window, and looking forward to later this afternoon getting outside for a little bit. As Maria mentioned, we've got Eryn O'Neil here today, and what she's going to do is she had a great session at Mini Bar a couple of weeks ago, and she's going to do a little bit of a recap, introduce herself, and then we'll start to open up for questions. So Eryn, would you like to kick us off and give us a little intro and walk us through last session that happened at Mini Bar? Great.
Yeah. Let me get my slides up on the screen. It'll just take a moment. hopefully. All right, y'all can see that? And
Perfect.
only that, I hope? Okay, perfect. Kai, all right, so as everybody said, this started life as a mini bar talk. Actually, it started life before that, but we'll get into that. But I'm just really excited to be here. This is gonna be an interesting, unique kind of session. Normally you'd go to like a conference or you hear a talk and there's like this much talk and then like this much Q&A. And instead we're gonna do like this much talk and this much Q&A, which is for me as a speaker, terrifying, but in the fun way. Like I feel kind of exhilarated. So we'll see how this goes. So leadership skills for the new manager. I'm Eryn. Please use she, her pronouns for me. A little bit about me. I'm the director of engineering at Cloudburst, a startup studio in Northeast Minneapolis. I have led some people over the years. Before I was a director, I was a manager. Before that, I was a tech lead. Before that, I was a engineer, an individual contributor kind of engineer. And I've also spent a lot of my free time kind of being in charge of things, because I guess that's just what I drift towards. I teach dance classes and help organize events for things. It's just sort of like my thing. So I also tweet some things. So I've got my Twitter handle in the bottom of most of these slides, and I would love to hear from you if you think this is great or if you think it is terrible. I just want to hear about it. So like I said, this actually started before Mini Bar. This was a 4-hour workshop. And then I thought, hey, I'll give a version of it at Mini Bar. Because I can cut this down to what's Mini Bar, like 50 minutes, 45 minutes. Well, of course the conference got canceled because everything got canceled. And then Mini Bar got canceled. And so then Maria said, hey, we're doing this mini bar thing. Do you want to take your talk and make it into 20 minutes? And then we decided to do this. So now it's 10 minutes. So this is a very small snippet of content from a much longer thing. I'm just going to give you some of the high notes because I want to set context for how I approach management, because I think that it will make the questions that you ask hopefully help direct them a little bit better and give you a sense of what I may or may not say when you ask. So let's do this. What's a manager's job? This is probably the #1 question that I get when I talk to new managers or people who are thinking about being managers, or just people who have managers and don't know what they do. So it's really easy when you're a developer to measure success. Are your tickets closed? Are you squashing bugs? Are you shipping features? Everything is very measurable. Not everything, but a lot of it, very measurable. You've got metrics, you've got charts, you've got all kinds of stuff. As a manager, our metrics change. And they get a lot less clear. It's a lot less obvious what constitutes success once you're no longer directly responsible for shipping. The manager's job is to create a healthy, happy, and high-functioning team. That's much more nebulous than closing tickets, shipping features, getting the story points down, but it is the essential ingredient in allowing other people to do those things. So let's just take a few minutes to step through how I see the role of a manager and what success looks like as a manager. So the manager's job is to foster a healthy, happy, high-functioning team by being the leader of that team. And like, I know that's like a total non-answer. Bear with me, we'll get through this. The leadership part is what I think too many people miss when they think about being a manager, because they start to think about the tasks. They think about, I have to distribute work, I have to do performance reviews, I have to, figure out policies for PTO, I have to do all of these things, but those should all be side effects of you leading the team and you creating an environment where people can succeed. So if you're distributing work, then that is because you are the person who is best suited to do it and you want to make sure that people are moving forward, for example. If you are putting together policies for PTO, well, that's because you want to come up with a system that's equitable and that allows people to get the breaks they need and is clear to everybody. You know, so it should all follow from this idea that you're leading the team. The rest of it is details. So non-answer, the whole is greater than the sum of its parts. You've heard this, right? It's a phrase that makes no logical or mathematical sense, but it is often true. The extra part of that is the leader. The leader of the group is the part who makes this true. So that is your goal as a leader of a team, whether you're a manager or just sort of helping be in charge or just the lead dev on something. You want to be the person who makes it true that the whole is greater than the sum of the parts. So if I like to visualize this, I really got to get someone to draw this for me. Actually, here's a quick question. Can you guys see my face or can you only see the slides? Do you know, Justin?
I think they can see both. I can see both right now.
Okay, good. I see wow, the chats are ticking up real fast. Okay, good, because then I can make gestures. So I got to get someone to draw this for me because I can't draw. But I think of it as if you've got like a bunch of people as circles. So you've got circle over here is Kate, circle over here is Jerry, circle over here is Devin. And these people all bring their own strengths and their skills. And if you try to put them all next to each other, you're going to have space between them, right? Because they're circles, because they can't actually go completely next to each other. If you put all of them together and build a circle around them, all of that negative space, that's what you fill in as a leader. That's the part that you are bringing to the table, is these individual people with their individual strengths, helping them gel in a way that makes them greater than the sum of the parts of that strength. So to be a good leader, it's actually a pretty simple formula. So you put people first, that's generally going to be the people reporting to you, or the people in the group that you're leading. And then second is everything else. So I am a strong advocate of people first leadership, people first management. Some people, there's a buzzword, servant leadership, which the phrase makes me a little uncomfortable. It sounds a little evangelical for my taste somehow, but it is a really wonderful concept because it really just means that the manager's job is not to exist in a hierarchy above or below anybody. It is to facilitate the work and the capabilities of other people. So I, as a manager, am here to help other people do their work, get their work done better. We are going to real quick touch on a few things that I think are important skills for this, and then we'll be done with this and you can start asking me what the heck I mean by all of this. But I'm going to throw these few things out there that we talked about in a little more depth in the mini bar talk. The first one is just empathy, because if you want to put people first and you want to understand where they're coming from, you got to know who they are. If you can't empathize with a group of people and meet them where they're at, you can't lead that group of people. So you need to see your team as individuals. It is human nature to assume that everyone works like us. Like the way that we work, we assume that everybody has the same sort of motivations and drives in life. And that's just simply not true. Everybody in this world is as fully formed a human being with a fully formed backstory, motivations, life, hope as you are. And that's sort of overwhelming to think about, but it means that we need to release a few of the shortcuts that we might use in assuming what people want out of things, and instead approach them as individual people who are going to be motivated by different things than us. So when I work with somebody, these are the questions that I use to guide me in the conversations. I don't literally ask this to people, though after I did this talk last time, then my boss turned around and literally asked me these questions, and I was like, I should have seen that coming. That's on me. But these are really helpful things to guide your thinking about the people that you're working with. What motivates them? Different people are totally motivated by different things. Some people want recognition. Some people want to write beautiful code. Some people want to help people. They don't particularly care about the sophistication of the solution they're making. There's so many different reasons. Some people just need a job and they want to do that job well. but they want to get paid and go home. I mean, there's so many different reasons and they're all valid. You also want to understand what crushes someone's spirit, because somebody who's motivated by helping people is probably going to be crushed by having to work in isolation. But somebody who's motivated by building beautiful technology is probably going to be crushed if you keep putting them on really simple maintenance work, or worse, if you have them just dealing with like customer service. So you need to understand what gets people going and what slows them down. Similarly, what are their work style? What are their goals? We could dive so far into this. This could be its own talk. It's not going to be. I'm going to leave it here. But these are four very good, important questions to lead your understanding of the best way to help your people get their work done and to facilitate them like blossoming and getting the best work out of them. So don't assume that people are motivated by the same things you are, because tons of research has shown that diverse teams produce better work. And if you assume that everybody works the same way you do, that will become a self-fulfilling prophecy. So it's very important that we start from the assumption that everybody with us is different, so that when we meet someone who works significantly differently than us, we can make allowances for them on our team and include, like, maintain those different points of view, as opposed to accidentally creating a very homogenous team simply by virtue of not realizing that we needed to change how we were working. Second, setting clear expectations. This is a really, really important part of being a manager, and in some ways kind of the only thing that being a manager is making it clear to people what you need from them. So one of the most important things you can do is make it clear. This can look like a lot of different things, so I'll just get into some examples of what I mean. So performance expectations. You want to make sure that people that you're working with understand what constitutes a good job and what would be an unacceptable job. Because the worst thing ever is to get to like a performance review and find out that you've been doing a bad job and you had no idea because the expectation wasn't made clearly to you. Similarly, code quality expectations. This can look like a lot of things. It can be a working agreement. It can be linting. It can be, very different things about what constitutes quality code. And this is one where it's very tempting to think that what I think is quality is what everyone, like we assume we all agree, right? But there's different ways to write good code, and some of it is really arbitrary, and it's just good to decide, agree, and move on. Interpersonal expectations. I think this one is really, really important, and this is another one I would love to talk more about if I wasn't trying to rush through this in 10 minutes, because it's incumbent on us as leaders to set the expectations for interpersonal interactions on our teams. And by that, I mean that people are looking to you as the example. So they're going to look at what you do and take that as an indication of what is and is not acceptable on the team. So if someone, so this doesn't just mean the way that you act, though that is certainly very important. It also means the way other people act. And if somebody is, for example, we've all seen somebody who's being a little too harsh in comment or code reviews, like they're attacking the code in a way that is really attacking the person. If you let that slide as a leader, what you're saying is that that's fine. You're saying that's the way we talk to each other here. If you don't want that to be true, then it's part of your job as a leader to make it clear what the expectations are for how people will work together. And finally, working agreements. So these are a tool that you can use to kind of codify any of these. That you can, if you're not familiar with working agreements, you can go Google it. There's a ton of writing out there about what that looks like. But the long and short of it is, as a team, you come together and agree on how we're going to work together, and then it becomes a mutual peer pressure. Like the culture is this, and we hold each other accountable to it. So then it's not just you as a leader being like, act this way. Just a little more effective. And my third and final point here is communicating with clarity. So Minnesota, we need to talk about this. I am not from here originally. I grew up in Chicago. You maybe could tell that by how fast I talk, but I am, I'm like an anthropological observer of Minnesota culture. I've been here for like 10 years now, over that. So I've got a sense. And the thing is that people in Minnesota, I mean, it's just that we don't have a very direct communication style here, right? Like there are rules about what is polite. There are rules about how to save other people's feelings and spare them sort of whatever. There's rules about asking for what you want, and more often not asking for what you want, but simply heavily implying it. All of these things, I'm not making a judgment about these things in your personal relationships, but in a workplace, they can get really, really bad pretty fast. Going back to the previous point, if we don't make our expectations for people clear, they can't meet them. And if we don't communicate with clarity, they can't know what the expectations are. So a couple more bullet points of how to think about this. To communicate with clarity, you got to figure out what you need to communicate, which sounds like a tautology, but I think that it's very common for people to walk into something and have a general feeling, but they haven't really thought through all the way down to what is the actionable thing that I want someone to take out of this, to the degree that they could say that to the other person. So it starts with sort of like sitting with yourself and thinking about like, okay, what do I need from this person? What do I need them to know? And at first, in my experience with reformed Minnesota communicators, it's a very, very deliberate, like you have to sit down and actively do this kind of thing at first, but then eventually it becomes far more automatic. But you want to be able to communicate really clearly to them what you need, because like I said before, the worst possible feeling is finally hearing that you've been doing something wrong for a really long time, when it would have not been such a big deal to bring it up sooner. When it comes to having difficult conversations, the longer you put it off, the worse it will be for everybody involved. We as human beings tend to put off things that are uncomfortable. We hope it will fix itself. We hope that we can sort of nudge somebody in the right direction. And there is certainly, you know, a time and a place for that, but after a certain point, you cross over from where it could have been like, hey, oh, I saw you wrote this library using this design pattern, and I just don't think here we actually should do this. Or that email that you sent yesterday to the client, I'd like to talk about the tone that you use. I think it was just a little bit more accusatory than we want it to be. Those are just feedback. They're just critiques that someone can take or not take and work with. The longer you put it off, though, the less it is just immediate feedback, and the more it is going to feel like an attack on them. The more it's going to feel like they've been carrying this thing and doing it wrong, and now they're wondering what else they're doing wrong, and they're wondering why you didn't tell them, and it's terrible. So I just promise you that the longer you put it off, the worse it will be. I wrote it in really big letters so that you would believe me. Because I can't tell you how true this is and how many times I've been bitten by it on both sides. The important thing is when to be a reformed communication putter offer, as soon as you notice you've done it, that's the point to fix it. Like, it's going to take a while before you don't have that happening all of the time, or at least some of the time. But as soon as you notice it, acknowledge it with the person, like, hey, I should have said this to you sooner, and I'm sorry about that, and here's what we need to fix. But don't keep putting it off. It will be so bad. Okay, that is my super fast overview of my super short version of my slightly shorter version of my 4-hour talk. So let's find out what you have questions about out of that.
Awesome, Eryn. That was great. And I was just taking notes. It was fabulous. All these are perfect insights. Let me ask you this while the chat's getting ready to ask some questions. You know, if you're someone who's new and wanting to get into a manager role, leadership, what are some of the things that person, he or she, should do to take some steps towards becoming a manager?
Totally. Yeah. If you want to get into management, that can be a very opaque process. I know that before I did it, I was just feeling like it's literally impossible. Like you can't get the job without having had the job, is what it feels like. Mm-hmm. The fortunate thing is that's not true. There's a few things that you can do to make yourself you put yourself on the right path. One really important one is if you think that your path will be internally getting promoted, like if your company is at a size and point where that's realistic, make it known to your boss that that's what you want. Make sure that they understand that that's what you're gunning for, and help them help you. Because a good manager is always trying to future-proof the team, and that includes being able to replace themselves. And so they will very possibly end up grooming you and helping you get into the role if you are not in a position where that is possible, because your company is that's just not where it is. Take advantage of other opportunities in your life to practice leadership skills and to demonstrate that you have this capability. So it can be anything, really. Like, it can join a board, run a volunteer program or an open source, coach t-ball. I mean, there's so many things that we do in life every single day that aren't in the workplace, but are leadership things, and those will help you. And then thirdly, there's some really good writing and books out there, and just reading some of the good writers that are writing about management will help you get a fluency with the vocabulary that is going to pay dividends when it comes to convincing somebody you can do this job. So I really recommend that.
Great. And we have another question here from the group. I'm just going to read it because it's a bit lengthy.
Okay.
But one of the biggest realizations that I have had moving into an admin role is how words have different meanings to different people. For example, if I were to tell the team, use the color blue, I might get sky blue, baby blue, navy blue, or any other variant of blue, maybe even blue-green. How do we go about ways to improve that communication to ensure we agree on expectations?
I love this. Oh man. Okay. So you're absolutely right. That's a really good observation, that just because you said a thing does not mean that it was heard the way that you meant it. So a few tools that I'll utilize. One is repeating back. So if someone's saying something to you and you say, okay, let me repeat that back to you just to make sure I understand it, and then try to rephrase it slightly. Because if you just parrot their words back to them, then of course they're going to say you got it. But if you can put it in your own words and they still say yes, then you have a little bit more clarity, or a little bit more confidence that you're both agreeing. Also, just being on the lookout for these kind of things. Like, you're not going to anticipate all of them, but once you notice that it's happening, I think that can be one of the most important skills as a facilitator, which is something managers end up being a lot, is noticing when two people are having, like, they think they're having the same conversation and they're not, they're having different conversations. So taking the opportunity to, like, clarify language, clarify definitions, when you have realized that people are not aligned, that you as the manager, you have the power to speak over anybody. And it's easy to use that for bad, but that's a place that would be really good to use it, is to be like, you know what, hold on, let's, like, I think we need to set some terms of engagement here because I'm not sure that we're all on the same page. And yeah.
So let me ask a follow-up on that. So as you think about the manager roles that you've had, and kind of, you know, where the rubber meets the road, what are there certain practices you take when it comes to setting the expectations up front? Do you do like you have like a one-on-one with them, like right up front? Do you write something down? What are some of the things that you've found beneficial when leading a team?
Yeah.
Managing?
I am a absolutely huge proponent of one-on-ones. I think every manager has a different approach to this, so I'm not going to say that mine is like right, but I do. I think that they should be sacred. I think they are the time of the person that you're talking to. So I'm going to take this opportunity to diverge a little bit into my one-on-one theory. But they are there for the person that you're talking to build a relationship of trust with you. And you can only build trust over time. And so that means, you know, making sure that you give them that 30 minutes or whatever a week. I like to do short ones weekly. There are other people who do longer ones less frequently. You know, that it depends on the people involved. But so I use those one-on-ones for sure to set expectations that are as clear as I can. It starts with like day one, like onboarding somebody and being like, okay, here's what your first week is going to look like, more or less. This is what I think we should do here. And, you know, here's what after that, all right, here's what this next week looks like. These are the projects I want you on. Here's why I want you on them. And here's what we're hoping to, you know, by the end of the week, this is where I hope we're at. And starting with like what feels like it would probably be self-evident, but realizing that it's not, both because they're new and because you are not their brain, and just over communicating. I believe very strongly in over communicating because there's no other way to know that both people are hearing the same thing.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, the next question I got here is, you know, back to the point you made around don't put things off to talk about. You know, what's a good time period for when you notice something, and maybe it's in a meeting or something, right? What's a good time to is it right in the moment, or is it later on? When's a good time to actually have that difficult conversation?
It depends on what the conversation will be about. So there's a few heuristics that I use to make that decision. I mean, in general, the short answer is as soon as possible. You know, it's the closest to the event as you can, the better. But there are reasons that you might not want to do it literally at that moment. One is if you can pull someone aside later and have that conversation and not derail a meeting or embarrass them, that's nice. I mean, when people are defensive, they don't hear what you're saying. And so the goal should be to make sure that you get the person you're talking to a point where they can hear you. Otherwise, why are you saying it? So that usually is going to mean taking them out of a place where they're going to feel a lot of, you know, shame or embarrassment because there's other people to see it. It might also mean waiting until emotions cool, if that's the situation. You know, if emotions are really high, it can be valid to say, hey, we have to talk about this. I think we both need a minute to calm down. Can I reach out to you later, today, tomorrow, whatever? The one time that I would absolutely speak up in the moment is if my goal is not so much to correct a behavior that person has done, but to demonstrate that behavior is not acceptable. So if somebody makes like a racially charged statement in a meeting, I would like to think that I will call them out right there, because what I want the rest of the team to understand is that's not cool. Not cool. Especially if the comment made is going to, like, if there are people in that room who that comment was about and they're hearing that and now they're wondering if they're welcome, you have to decide which person you're prioritizing in that situation. For me, I prioritize the person who was hurt by the statement, and that might make the other person embarrassed to be called out right there, but that's sort of an important part of culture setting.
Yeah, it goes back to some of that expectations up front around, you know, respect for all, right? Some of the things we learned in kindergarten, but you know,
yeah, it's part of setting what are acceptable ways to interact. Like if that's what you're trying to say, sometimes it works best to just say right there, like, no, absolutely not. Yeah.
Good. Another question, and quite lengthy, so I'm going to read it here, is I'm in my first manager role.
Congrats.
But my manager seems to keep pushing me into an individual contributor role because of my previous experience. It feels like she is trying to get two roles in one, a working data scientist and a manager of a team. How do I communicate with her that I took this role to move away from day-to-day coding, or all tech managers, working managers these days, and I missed that memo?
This is such a good question. So they're not all tech managers are working managers. A lot are. A lot has been written about how much one should stay in the code or in whatever their field is once they go manage. And there's a lot of different opinions there. I think it's important to stay somewhat close to it because you need to remember what it is that you're managing. That said, you probably won't be writing things that ship anymore, and shouldn't be, in my opinion, because if you are being a manager who is putting people first, then that will always have to take precedence over whatever we're trying to ship. if that's what comes up, you know what I mean? So it's like, it's not safe to have somebody who has responsibility for people to have like super mission critical things all of the time.
Mm-hmm.
So not to be too flip, but I think how you tell your manager that you took this job to not do any coding is you tell your manager that.
Mm-hmm.
It's not, I mean, there are better and worse ways to have that conversation, but like, you are responsible for your own career. You need to, you own that, and telling your manager what you want out of your job is part of it. Hopefully you work somewhere that won't backfire on you.
Mm-hmm.
But frankly, sometimes what you want as a manager, or as anybody, but we'll limit it right now, what you want out of the management role is not what that organization needs from you in the management role. And that can be a really frustrating place to be. And I've been there. Where, I had a certain idea of the allocation of the percentage of my time that would be ideal. And it was just not what that business needed. That business needed a manager who was coding at least 30% of the time. So it's not everywhere that you would be coding, but it is absolutely someplace. And I think it's very, very important for managers, all managers, but especially new managers, to explicitly align the expectations of like, how much of your time will you be spending on whatever. And honestly, as managers, because it's so much harder to measure what we do, it's actually really common for management folks to have percentage buckets of like, I spend this much of my time on this and this much of my time on this, because that's like the closest thing we can come to measuring what we do. So I think if nothing else, that is a great exercise to take up with your manager and talk to her about like, where do you think these buckets are? Here's where I'd like the buckets to be. Can we move these sliders and get somewhere more comfortable?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
But if I will say that if you're expected to be a manager and put out the work of a full-time developer, that's unrealistic.
Mm-hmm.
They may expect that, they may ask that, but you're not the wrong one for thinking you can't do that, because you can't. It's 2 jobs.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and this goes around kind of delegation too, around how much do you do the work versus delegate the work,
Yeah,
and that whole piece of it. Do you have any thoughts on that or
that's a hard
advice?
one. That is a really hard one. um, I think of it in terms of responsibility. So if someone asks me for something, it's about levels of abstraction. They don't necessarily care how it gets done. They just care that it gets done.
Mm-hmm.
So if I want to have someone on my team take it on versus I want to do it versus, someone on the team takes it on, but like, I am ultimately responsible for knowing that it ships. So like, that's really, I think what it comes down to is in terms of delegation, is it's like, you can delegate whatever you want, but the VP who asked you for such and such really doesn't care why it didn't get done. They just need it done. So after that point, it's kind of up to you on how you want to manage your team.
Great. And I'll say thanks to everyone in the chat. There are lots of questions, so we'll try to get through as many as we can here.
I'll try to talk like less comprehend. I'll make
No,
shorter answers.
this is all good. This is all good. And if you don't see your question and asked, please ask it again. We're getting a lot through, so if you, not to overwhelm the chat, but we appreciate all these questions. Here's another one. What are some good questions to ask in a one-on-one?
There's a bajillion good questions to ask in a one-on-one. This is something that if you want, you can do some Googles and you'll get lists upon lists upon lists. And actually, I will give a plug for, there's a website, I can't remember the URL right now, but you basically, every time you refresh it, it gives you 3 questions. And there are questions you can ask in a one-on-one. And I have definitely been in one-on-ones where I'm like, I quick pull it up, refresh. I'm like, oh good, I'll ask that one. So that can be a nice tool in your back pocket. But in general, probably my favorite question I've ever been asked in a one-on-one is there anything that the company can be doing to support you that you're not getting right now? The first time I got asked that, I was just like, wow, I feel so loved. And now that I've started using it, I get great answers from people about little things and big things and all sorts of things. So that's a really, really nice one. I think it's also important to talk about you want to avoid talking about the work. Like there are status updates for that. Like that's not really what you want to hear unless it's in the context of like, how are you growing and how are you feeling? So I like to ask about goal setting. I want to ask about, not where do you see yourself in 6 months, because that's a bad question, but like, what are the things that are energizing you right now? What do you want to work on? Is there anyone in the company that you'd like to work with more closely? Is there any projects that you would like to be on that you're not on right now? What is like your favorite part of your job? What is your least favorite part of your job? And then one that doesn't make sense for everybody, but I work at a mission-based company or a B Corp. So I like to ask like, why do you work here? Like what part of what we do resonates with you? Because everybody who works there is there, at least in part because of the mission. So that's fertile grounds for conversation.
Good. Yeah, there's a lot on the one-on-ones.
Oh my God,
lots
yeah.
of questions.
That's a whole talk right there.
And I think the key thing is trying to set some frequency, right? And also get people in a place where they feel comfortable sharing you, right? And being open and honest, because that's how you can, if you can discover issues, concerns, then you can fix them, right?
Totally.
So that's half the battle, is getting people to open up.
100%. I will add, actually, probably the most important question that I ask is at the very end, before we've hit time, when there's still a few minutes, I say, okay, is there anything else that you wanted to talk about? Because when there is, it's something that like, they kind of wanted to talk about it, but they were like, didn't really want to bring it up. And they kind of thought and then we got to the end and they're like, oh, I guess I'm just not gonna. And then you like give them the opening. And that is when you have like the conversations. Like that is when you find out someone is thinking of leaving. That is when you find out that they had a problem with someone else on the team that is like, bearing them down. Like though I got it from an episode of Dr. House, MD, actually, and they called it the hand on the doorknob question. And they said that the most important question a patient asks is always the question they ask once their hand is on the doorknob and they're leaving. And I was like, it's brilliant. So I've worked it into my one-on-ones, and I've caught a lot of things with that one.
That's great.
I hope no one who works for me is watching this. They're going to know whatever.
I jotted that one down. Here's another one. What actions do you recommend for someone managing a team that has already been highly functioning prior to coming into the role?
Congratulations.
Yeah. So making the transition, it sounds like to a manager leader role, but it's already been, knocking it out of the park.
Yeah. I mean, if you're knocking it out of the park, keep knocking it. Like, there's always some kind of room for improvement, but so don't get too, don't be too confident. Like, okay, we're doing good, we don't have to do more, because teams require maintenance. They're machines, they don't just run forever. They need oiling and greasing and all of the other metaphor parts. So you definitely want to figure out, you want to try to anticipate things that might come up. It's also, if we're talking in a work context, there is always something that can be automated. There's always some tech debt that needs to get addressed. Like there's always something. So if you really have it to where everybody's working really efficiently, awesome. Now you have a chance to go and address some of those things that would make it even better. And sometimes it's rare, but your team can get to the point where they're like, no, we're really we're good. There's nothing else to add. And at that point, one of my favorite things that I've ever seen a team do is they focused outward then. So they were like, all right, how do we help the rest of the company like get better? And I thought that was just like the coolest thing. And it, in that case, it worked. They sort of helped other teams stitch up their Scrum process. They helped some of the product development, sort of like ticketing stuff. They basically just took what was working so well and figured out how to export it. And that is like such a cool thing to do. And it's a heck of a resume builder too.
Yeah. So now that we've made this shift, and a lot of people are working from home and trying to manage teams. I know in your previous role, you were in a situation, now you are again, where you've been managing teams remotely. Mm-hmm. Can you talk about some, just advice and suggestions on how to do that? What level of communication is needed, and You kind of help people that are now for the first time managing a team remotely.
Oh man. Yeah, my heart goes out to you. My previous job, as Justin said, I was doing a fully remote team, and then I got a new job and I worked in the office for 3 days and we went to full work from home. So it's been an adventure. The number one rule of working remote is over communicate. Just communicate so much. Whatever your tools are that you're using, tickets, Slack, like whatever, like just go well out of your way to put everything there. And remember that tone is tricky. It's not that it doesn't communicate, but it's tricky. And especially if the team isn't, if the team is sort of new to working with each other, or if you're a new manager, if people don't have a lot of in-person context to fall back on how to interpret what you say, you really have to be cognizant of writing things in a clear and unambiguous way. There's certain jokes that, or maybe just don't go there yet. Also remember that you no longer have incidental social contact, so you have to be deliberate about creating it, which is one reason that I believe so much, especially right now, in weekly one-on-ones, because that might be the only time I see that person's face all week. And there's no way I can have any kind of relationship with them, know what they're going through, know what things might be on their mind without making sure we talk. Especially with new people, I actually have like 2 or 3 one-on-ones a week, and they're really just check-ins. Like if we don't have a half an hour of stuff to talk about, that's fine. But like I'm putting really explicit meetings on the calendar to make sure that we're getting FaceTime. Now, I know some companies have the opposite problem where they are just like in meeting overload. And if that's your situation, then I really implore you to figure out what you can do asynchronously, because if people are on Zoom calls all day, they're not working, like their brains are melty and like it's no good. So, you have to figure out kind of where you are. If things are sort of quiet or people aren't feeling connected, then you have to build that connection. If people are getting overwhelmed with how many meetings you have, don't try to replicate fully the in-office experience of like, well, I normally would just walk by your desk and we chat about this for 10 minutes. And then it's like, we kind of don't have that right now. And the trade-off might be that you get to have that conversation and have it deliberately on a call. And that's nice. But if you're doing that for everything, you're just going to like wear everybody out. So there's an element of balance that has to be found.
Yeah, we have a follow-up in the chat here about specifically pandemic and working remotely. They say, I've noticed that I'm having a harder time focusing on work due to just external stressors. What advice would you have for employees who might be struggling to remain productive in a time of uncertainty?
There's a global pandemic. Of course you are. Like, this is a moment where I'm actually really happy that I'm talking to potentially a room of managers, because I think have a responsibility to give people leeway right now. Like everybody's doing their best. The weight of the world is a lot. Even if you had nothing else, if you didn't have like family to worry about, if you weren't worried about like your partner getting laid off, if it's just like, there's a global pandemic. So the first step to this, I think, is compassion, whether it's for yourself or for the people you work with. Everybody's wound a little tight. Everybody's really tired. Forgive yourself. Try to set, going back to expectation setting, I think one of the worst things for mental health and burnout is when people think they need to be doing, this amount and the reality is here. So like there's this mismatch between what they think they need to accomplish and what they're actually accomplishing. And I strongly encourage people to have just explicit conversations about like with your manager or with your reports, whoever, and just be like, look, this is where I'm at. This is just where we are. Because if you are trying to aim at this and you keep missing, you're going to make it worse. And so it can feel really terrible. I know especially if you're somebody who, like your identity is kind of wound up into how productive you are. It can be really awful to say, I just can't. But like, if you just can't, that's fine. You do what you can do. You don't compare yourself to anybody else. You don't compare yourself to past you. Just figure out what you can do, bring that to your manager, and go from there. Because even if you don't want to do, like, even if you don't want to have that conversation because it sucks, it's like, you're not going to suddenly be able to be more productive. This is just going to keep getting worse and worse and worse until everything changes, because that's the nature of burnout. That's the nature of like human psychology. So just be gentle with yourself and others.
Yeah, no. Here's a situation where we've got an employee that's been challenging for a while, and I'll read this specific situation and let's see if we have, we can tap your brain, Eryn, for some advice on how to deal with the situation.
I think I see where this is going, but let's do it.
So how do you handle an individual that does not meet performance or code expectations? You have tried mentoring, going over code. We've covered things like deadlines and the fact that the individual is consistently missing them. They do not seem to take pride in the work. When you talk with them, they either say, yeah, my bust, I should have done that, or they do not seem to realize that there's a problem, even though you've gone over the same issue in the past, and they have acknowledged the problem in the past over and over. So consistent, habit of underperforming. Yep. Have you ever had to let an individual go due to not meeting expectations?
Oh yeah, sure. I'm gonna just give this whole answer as if there's not a global pandemic right now, because I can't like handle caveating this. But yes, totally. I mean, that's part of what we do. It's the least fun part of what we do, but yeah, like firing people is part of the job. It sounds, in this specific example, it sounds like you have made your expectations clear. You've communicated to them what they need to do and they're not doing it. And the next step is they don't work there anymore. It's not fun, but a company or a team, like, I think it's very important to remember that somebody not fitting in at a particular company or team is not a reflection on them as a person. Like, somebody who really can't succeed in one group there's a place where they can thrive. It just turns out it's not here. And so if you've given people reasonable chances to improve, you've made it clear what you need from them, you have given them, whatever support it is that you feel is correct to offer, and they're still not doing it, there's not much more to say. Sometimes letting someone go can be a kind of a gift. Not to like, firing people sucks. I am not trying to say it doesn't, but when it gets to the point that both sides have been struggling, it can be a real weight off the shoulders for both people. And this is going back to my thing before, like, the hard conversations, the longer you put them off, the harder they are. The longer you've worked with this person to try to fix it, the harder it is to finally say it's not working. I totally get that. But if it's not working, it's not working. And you can't make somebody work. All you can do is show them what you need. And if they can't rise up to that, then they can't rise up to it.
Yep. And stop being Minnesota nice, right?
Yeah. It's not nice
to conversation.
It's not nice to like string someone on, because they may not recognize that things are problems, but God, I guarantee in the back of their mind, they're carrying that stress. They know, they're waiting for the axe to drop, because that's people, right? So like, I'm sorry, it sucks. Get some mentorship, have some people at your company help you if you've never done this before. The first time I ever had to fire somebody, one of the partners and an HR person and my director and another manager all made a private Slack channel where, and I was in it, and like, they just kind of backed me up on everything. And like, I told them what was happening, and they gave me a lot of like, it was really wonderful support, and it was a really hard thing to do. But having that little ring of support around me from people above me in the company and people who'd done this before made a big difference. So yeah, you don't have to do this alone. And in fact, you shouldn't, because HR would probably be really upset if you did. But yeah, pull in allies and do what you need to do.
All right, we have time for just maybe a couple more questions here before we wrap up. The next one I have here, Eryn, is what tips do you have for acquiring critical feedback from the team for your own improvement? My team and my manager seem to be very agreeable and complimentary, but I know I am not perfect and can certainly improve.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So I think one thing is to create, like, make sure you're setting the groundwork of the relationship where like they know that it'll be safe to do that. Psychological safety is a hugely important concept when it comes to any relationship that has a power differential. And you as a manager and the people who report to you, I don't care how many beers you've had together, how long you've worked together, there is a power differential. So it's really important to do what you can to mitigate the fear that people might bring about giving you feedback if they work for you. Second, I find it helpful when thinking about feedback to think about impact as opposed to like qualities. So instead of saying like, I'll tie this back to what you're asking, but so instead of being like, you're late a lot, you know, like it feels like you're always late to our calls, saying like, you know, you were late to the last 3 stand-ups and that meant that the stand-up had to start late and that was frustrating. That's a framework that is more actionable and usually is going to get better response. And so using the idea of impact as you're asking about feedback can help depersonalize it and can help people, one, give you better feedback, but two, feel less scared about being like, they're not saying like you're bad. They're saying like, well, on the last project, it was kind of frustrating when you know, kept pushing the deadline or something like that, you know? So letting people, like, setting it up in terms of impact. And then there are lots of like different approaches to gathering feedback. You've got like anonymous, you know, you've got 360 reviews, whatever. There's a huge world of things to go into there that I just couldn't even scratch the surface of. But there are structures and formats out there for more formal ways of getting that feedback. But in the day-to-day, the easiest thing is just to like, well, easiest thing, but like the thing that I think works best is just to set up a relationship where you're doing what you can to demonstrate that you have humility and it is safe for them to tell you feedback, and ask for it. Not like every time, because that's like a bit much. Like people, like you don't want to like have a complex in front of people because that's uncomfortable, but you know, regularly make it part of your questions. You know, what can we be doing to support you more? You know, how can I help you do a better job? Is there anything that I'm doing that, you know, am I accidentally getting in your way anywhere? Or if there's something that you observe that you think might be, you can ask about that specifically.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I found especially with the Minnesotans that are maybe a little passive aggressive, that they may not tell you to your face, but they'll tell you anonymously, digitally. So things like tools like the 360 feedback, where it's anonymous, you can actually get some, you know, somewhat honest, open feedback. Some of it, you know, you have to take with a grain of salt, that they may be airing, you know, all
Airing
their
grievances.
complaints, grievances and all that. But it may open up, you know, your eyes to just seeing some of the things that they wouldn't, you know, never tell you, even if you sought it out, you know, and asked them. So,
well, and a tip, if you go the anonymous feedback route, if that just scares you so way too much to do it, you can rope in someone to help to like aggregate it. So they read the unfiltered part, they make sure no one's being a total jerk, and they just kind of like rewrite it and then share that with you. And that can be a way to get that feedback without just like having to open your soul too wide.
So as we look to wrap up the session, Eryn, any book recommendations, websites, anything that you can share with the group here that would help them, especially as maybe newer to management and the whole leading route? Anything that comes to mind that you'd like to share?
Sure. So there's two women that do, they write a lot about management, and they have great things. Actually, I'll make that 3 now that I think about it. Laura Hogan, she has a couple books. She's got writings on blogs. The books are on a list apart. They're small and they're good. And Camille Fournier also has some writings. She has a book called The Manager's Path, which is really highly regarded and is a good planning tool for like your career. kind of at any point that you're in it. Like if you're thinking, okay, I want to be a director, I want to be a VP, like whatever that is, like that's kind of what that book's about. So that's a good one. And then the third person is a woman named Chelsea Troy. She should be a lot more famous than she is. She does a lot of management blogging, and oh my gosh, I want her to write a book. I keep telling her, she won't, but well, maybe she will, I don't know, but she should. She just is very insightful. Her blog is great. Her name's Chelsea Troy. And then the fourth thing I will recommend is a community. If you aren't afraid to drink from the fire hose, there's a dude that goes by the internet name Rands, R-A-N-D-S. He is sort of like, he did a lot of management and leadership blogging more like 10, 15 years ago. He's still around, but like 10, 15 years ago, he was like a real famous internet person. But he started a Slack called the Rands Leadership Slack. And it is a lot. There's a lot of people in it, but it is maybe one of the most, I can't think of a better collection of like wisdom all in one place. You can just be a fly on the wall and read, and you'll learn a ton. So yeah, so those are the three people I would recommend looking at. And then that Slack community it's something else. Like it can be a lot, but there's a lot of good wisdom in there. Even if you never ask a question, just read other people's stuff.
Awesome. Well, that's great. Yeah, I couldn't agree more with the Laura Hogan. I'll have to check out some of these other ones. I'll also throw in Simon Sinek. I just recently finished Leaders Eat Last, which is another good book on sharing some of the similar principles you brought up today, Eryn.
I'm writing that down right now.
Yeah, Leaders Eat Last. Simon Sinek. He's done a few TED Talks. He's got a lot of good stuff on leadership and management. And
the other thing I'll throw out for the specific crowd, for the Minnesotans, there's two books. One is called Crucial Conversations, and one is called Radical Candor. Radical Candor, there's a TED Talk. That's probably the place to start before you go for the book because it's shorter. Actually, it's not a TED Talk. It's just a talk. There are talks that aren't at TED. Did you know that? Radical Candor is literally the opposite of how everybody here communicates. So it might be interesting just to check it out. And Crucial Conversations is a little bit more middle of the road, but that's a really good book specifically about having hard conversations and strategies to make that less awful and more effective. And then I'm done.
All right. Well, Eryn, this has been great. Where can people find you if they want to learn more or reach out to you after the fact?
Twitter. That's the best place to find me. Is I'm big on the tweets. I have a mailing list that I almost never use, so I will not spam you. I'm not like a newsletter person, but when I've got trainings or whatnot available, I will share it up there. So I'll put that link on my Twitter. It's an ugly URL. I'm not going to say it now. And yeah, find me on the tweets. Also, Cloudburst, where I work, we're not actively hiring, but we're always a little hiring. So come check out our site if you want to, especially if you are a senior JavaScript full stack developer, or if you're sort of a UI, UX product design manager kind of person. Those are the things that we are particularly looking for right now. So come work at a place with a mission. Yeah.
Awesome. Well, thanks again, Eryn. Thanks for taking the time. Thanks to everyone who joined. We had a great interactive group today, so we really appreciate that. Our next mini AMA is next week on Wednesday, May 20th, and we're doing it on mental health. So we've got some great presenters that are going to share on some mental health strategies and help give some advice during these challenging times. We hope you can make it again, May 20th at noon. So with that, we will wrap up today's mini AMA. Thanks again, Eryn, and have a great rest of your day.
Thank you, everybody. This was awesome. Bye.